I'm Amelia, 29, a woman who finds more comfort in the silent stories of old buildings than in the loud, empty words of my own family. And my family just told me, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't welcome on the grand Italian vacation I had spent the last 2 years of my life planning and paying for. The pronouncement came, of all places, at dinner. It was a Tuesday, one of our forced monthly gatherings at my mother's house. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and the even thicker tension that had become my permanent dining companion. My brother, Ethan, sat across from me, swirling his wine with an air of unearned importance. My sister, Chloe, was glued to her phone, probably curating a perfect shot of her meal for her thousands of followers. And my mother, Eleanor, presided over it all from the head of the table, a queen surveying a kingdom from which I was quietly being exiled. "So, Italy," Ethan began, setting his glass down with a thud. He looked at Mom, then Chloe, a smug little smile playing on his lips. He didn't look at me. That was the first clue. Just a few final details to sort out before we leave next week. My heart gave a little flutter of excitement, a foolish, hopeful little beat. For a moment, I forgot. I forgot the years of being pushed to the periphery, the inside jokes I was never privy to, the holiday plans made without my input. For a moment, I was just a daughter and a sister, excited about a family trip. The trip. The one I had dreamed up to honor my father's memory. The one I had presented to my mother on her 60th birthday, complete with a detailed itinerary and a savings account I had diligently fed for years. "Oh, that reminds me," Ethan said, finally turning his gaze to me. It was cold, dismissive. "Amelia, make sure you're not around when we leave for the airport next Saturday. We're getting a car service around noon. Would be awkward if you tried to tag along." The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering with malice. I felt the blood drain from my face. My fork, halfway to my mouth, froze. I looked from Ethan's smirk to Chloe, who finally glanced up from her phone, her expression a perfect mask of indifference. Then I looked at my mother. I was pleading with my eyes, begging her to correct him, to laugh it off as a cruel joke. My mom just offered a tight, sympathetic-looking smile that didn't reach her eyes. She patted her lips with a napkin. "It's just not your place anymore, dear," she said, her voice soft, which made it 1,000 times more brutal. "It's a family trip, for us." For us, 3 words that drew a circle around them and left me standing on the outside, shivering. The unspoken 4th word echoed in the space between us, "Not you." My mind reeled, trying to grasp the sheer audacity. This wasn't their trip. It was my gift, my gesture, my money. I had chosen the destination, Tuscany, because Dad had always wanted to see the rolling hills and the ancient architecture. I, the architectural historian, had mapped out a route through Florence and Siena, securing tour of buildings he'd only seen in books. I had booked a sprawling villa with a pool, big enough for all of us, imagining laughter and reconciliation under the Italian sun. I had paid for the flights, the deposit on the villa, the rental cars, everything. My name was on every confirmation email, my credit card on every receipt. They were stealing my dream and trying to sell it back to me as their exclusive property. My throat felt tight, and for a second I thought I might choke on the betrayal. But then, something inside me, a part of me that had been dormant and worn down by years of quiet slights, snapped into focus. It was a cold, hard clarity. They weren't just excluding me, they were erasing me. This wasn't the first time. The pattern had started 5 years ago after my father passed away. He had been the family's center of gravity, but he had been my son. He was the one who saw me, who championed my quiet, academic nature against the boisterous, sales-driven personalities of my siblings. When he got sick, it was a foregone conclusion that I would be the one to move back home and care for him. Ethan was too busy closing deals, and Chloe was too busy building her brand. I put my postgraduate research on hold, spending my days managing medications and my nights reading to him from his favorite history books. After he was gone, the grief was a chasm. I had assumed it would bring us, the remaining 4, closer together. I was wrong. It was as if, by caring for him, I had become a living monument to their guilt and his absence. They wanted to move on, to fill the silence with noise and shiny objects, and my presence was a quiet, constant reminder of what they'd lost and what they hadn't done. The first major blow was the Christmas after he died. I had suggested we do all the things Dad had loved, make his favorite brandy-soaked fruitcake, watch his old black and white films. My mother had agreed, but when I showed up at her house on Christmas Eve, I found her, Ethan, and Chloe packing for a last-minute trip to a ski resort. "Oh dear," Mom had said, her hands fluttering nervously. "It was just too sad to be here without him. Ethan got a wonderful deal. We tried to call you." They hadn't. My phone had been silent all day. I spent that Christmas alone in the house my father had died in, the ingredients for his fruitcake sitting untouched on the counter. Then there was my 27th birthday. I had mentioned wanting to see a specific museum exhibit for months. On the day, they took me out for a brunch that was performatively cheerful. As I opened my gift, a generic gift card to a department store, Chloe had happily announced that she and Mom had spent the entire previous day at the very exhibit I wanted to see. "It was a girls' day," she'd chirped, oblivious. "You would have been bored, Amelia. All that old stuff." My mother had just smiled, adding, "We thought you'd prefer the brunch, dear." They chipped away at me, piece by piece, making me feel like a stranger in my own family. They redefined family to be a club of three, with me as a recurring guest star they could write out of the script at will. And now this, the Italy trip, my trip. My hand was shaking slightly as I picked up my wine glass. I looked at their expectant faces. They were waiting for me to argue, to cry, to make a scene. They were braced for it, ready to paint me as overly emotional and difficult, just as they always did. I would not give them the satisfaction. I raised my glass, the crystal catching the light. I met Ethan's gaze, then my mother's. I gave them a small, serene smile. "Understood," I said, my voice as even and calm as a frozen lake. I took a sip of wine. The reaction was immediate, though subtle. Ethan looked momentarily confused, his triumphant smirk faltering. My mother's polite mask tightened. They had expected a fight. My quiet acceptance was more unsettling to them than any outburst would have been. The rest of the dinner passed in a strained silence. I ate my chicken, commented on the weather, and excused myself as early as was politely possible. As I drove home, the calm began to crack, tremors of rage and profound sorrow shaking my composure. I had to pull over to the side of the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The tears finally came, hot and furious. Tears for my father. Tears for the family I thought I had. Tears for the fool I had been, thinking a grand gesture, a perfect trip, could ever buy back their love or respect. By the time I walked into my apartment, the tears were gone. The sorrow had cooled and hardened into something else, something heavy and solid. Resolve. They thought I would just roll over and accept this. They thought I would absorb this ultimate humiliation, just as I had absorbed all the minor ones. They thought my place was to be quiet, to be forgotten, to be erased. That night, sitting in the blue glow of my laptop screen, I decided they were wrong. My place was not to tag along. My place was not with them. My place was at my own computer, logged into the airline's website with the confirmation number of the tickets I had paid for. I quietly canceled Ethan's ticket, then Chloe's. Then, with a deep, cleansing breath, my mother's. I canceled the villa. I canceled the rental cars. I canceled every last trace of the dream they had tried to steal. And then I waited. The moments after I clicked the final confirm cancellation button were unnervingly silent. My apartment, usually a haven of quiet comfort, felt like the still, charged air after a lightning strike. The only sound was the soft whir of my laptop's fan and the frantic, heavy beating of my own heart. I stared at the screen, at the words, "Your booking has been successfully canceled." A full refund would be processed back to my card within 7 to 10 business days. It was done. In less than 15 minutes, I had dismantled a trip that had taken 2 years to build. Every saved dollar, every hour spent researching Tuscan villages, every hopeful daydream of reconciliation, all of it gone. A profound sense of loss washed over me, so sharp and sudden it felt like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the money or the vacation. It was the death of a hope I hadn't even realized I was still clinging to. The hope that my family could still see me, that they could still love me the way they once had, or the way I had imagined they did. I pushed back from my desk and walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city. The rage from the car ride had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, desolate landscape in my chest. The woman who had planned that trip, the hopeful, forgiving, earnest Amelia, felt like a stranger to me now. She had believed that a shared experience, a beautiful backdrop, could mend the deep, structural fractures in our family. She had thought she could literally bill Dia bridge back to them with airline tickets and hotel reservations. What a naive fool she had been. My profession as an architectural historian had taught me that you can't just slap a coat of paint on a building with a rotted foundation. You have to go deeper, to the source of the decay. If the core structure is compromised, the whole thing is a lost cause. My family was a lost cause. Tonight's dinner wasn't a crack in the foundation. It was the final, groaning collapse of the entire edifice. My brother's words played over and over in my mind. Would be awkward if you tried to tag along. Awkward. He had used the word to describe my presence on a trip I had orchestrated. My mother's voice joined his in the cruel chorus. It's just not your place anymore. Not my place. I, who had held my father's hand as he took his last breath in the living room of her house. I, who had sorted through his papers, who had written his eulogy because everyone else was too overcome with their public-facing grief to manage the private, painful details. That house, that family, was no longer my place. I felt a sudden, chilling calm settle over me. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance. It was detachment. I was an historian observing a ruin. I could document its decay, understand the reasons for its collapse, but I could no longer live inside it. I walked back to my laptop and began the second phase of my quiet rebellion. I opened my email and methodically began forwarding every single receipt and confirmation to a new folder I labeled Italy Trip. The flight confirmations for 4 round-trip tickets to Florence, clearly showing my name as the purchaser and my credit card for payment. The email from the Tuscan villa rental agency, a charming place called Villa al Tramonto, Villa at Sunset, confirming our 2-week stay, paid in full by me. The confirmation for the 2 rental cars, essential for navigating the countryside. All of it, a digital paper trail of my generosity and their betrayal. As I compiled the evidence, the last vestiges of my sorrow were replaced by a grim sense of purpose. This was no longer just an act of hurt or revenge. It was a necessary amputation. To save myself, I had to cut them off. The financial aspect was secondary, but it was the only language they truly seemed to understand. Ethan, with his commission-based income and obsession with status symbols. Chloe, whose entire life was a performance of curated luxury for her online audience. My mother, who enabled them both, funding their lifestyles while offering me hollow platitudes. Taking the trip away was the only way to make them feel a fraction of the dismissal they had shown me. They hadn't just uninvited me, they had stolen from me, and I was simply reclaiming my property. I thought about the money. It was a significant amount, nearly $20,000 that I had painstakingly saved. For a moment, I pictured them at the check-in counter. The confusion, the dawning horror, the frantic calls. I imagined the arguments that would erupt between them, the blame shifting from one to the other. Who was supposed to have the confirmation? Who did Amelia send the documents to? Their perfect, exclusive vacation crumbling into chaos and recrimination before it even began. A small, dark part of me savored that image. But what would I do now? The money would be returned to my account. The 2 weeks I had booked off work were still there, a blank space in my calendar. The initial, bitter impulse was to just put the money back into savings, to let the whole thing fade into another scar. Then a new idea began to form. It was tentative at first, a whisper of defiance. Why should their cruelty rob me of Tuscany? Why should I let them poison the memory of a dream my father and I had shared? He had wanted to see the Uffizi Gallery. He had talked about wanting to taste real Chianti while looking out over a vineyard. They had tried to take that from him, from his memory, just as they had tried to take it from me. I opened a new browser tab and typed Villa al Tramonto into the search bar. The website loaded, filled with beautiful pictures of the stone farmhouse, the infinity pool overlooking the hills, the cypress trees standing like sentinels against a golden sky. It was available for the exact 2 weeks I had originally booked. Of course it was. I had only just canceled it. My fingers trembled slightly as I navigated the booking page. Number of guests, the form asked. I hesitated for only a second before typing. 1. I rebooked the villa, just for me. Then I went to the airline's website. I booked a single ticket to Florence, first class. I used the points I had been saving for years, the ones I had intended to use to upgrade my parents as a surprise. I booked a small, zippy Alfa Romeo, perfect for one person to navigate winding country roads. By the time the sun began to hint at rising, I had rebuilt the entire trip. But this version was different. It was leaner, quieter. It was mine. It was a trip not of forced family fun, but of solitary pilgrimage. A journey to honor my father and perhaps to find the person I was supposed to be now that I was finally, truly on my own. I shut my laptop and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The plan was no longer undone. It was reborn. They could have their drama at the airport. They could have their shouting matches and their empty gestures. I would have Tuscany. The week that followed was one of the strangest of my life. It was an exercise in surreal calm, a masterclass in holding my breath. I had thrown a metaphorical bomb into the heart of my family's grand plan, but the fuse was a week long, and only I could hear the faint, insistent sizzle. Outwardly, I projected an aura of serene acceptance. I went to work at the university's architectural archive, losing myself in the scent of old paper and the quiet dignity of centuries-old blueprints. I ate my meals, I answered my emails, I went to the gym. I moved through the motions of my life as if nothing had happened, as if a foundational piece of my world hadn't been shattered and then deliberately rebuilt for one. Internally, however, I was a coiled spring. Every ping from my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was waiting for the discovery, for the moment one of them would try to check the flight status or print a boarding pass and find nothing there. But the ping was never from them. It was a work email, a notification from a news app, a message from a friend. My family remained blissfully, infuriatingly silent on the matter of the trip's logistics. Their silence was, in itself, the most damning evidence of their mindset. They had so thoroughly claimed the trip as their own that it never occurred to them that I, the original planner and sole financier, held all the keys. They saw me as a discarded accessory, not the architect of the entire endeavor. Their arrogance was my shield, keeping my secret safe. On Wednesday, Chloe texted me, not a word about the dinner, of course. That uncomfortable moment had been neatly excised from the family narrative. Instead, it was a picture of 3 new, ridiculously expensive-looking swimsuits laid out on her bed. The caption read, "Can't decide. Which one screams Tuscan influencer the most? LOL." The old Amelia would have felt a fresh wave of pain. She would have seen the casual cruelty in the message, the deliberate flaunting of the trip she was barred from. She would have typed out a dozen angry replies and deleted them all before settling on a noncommittal. The blue one is nice. The new Amelia, the one who held the cancellation confirmations like a royal flush, looked at the picture and felt a profound sense of pity. Chloe's entire existence was a performance for an unseen audience. She wasn't excited about seeing Italy. She was excited about being seen in Italy. I typed back a simple, one-word reply, "Whatever." A few minutes later, 3 dots appeared and disappeared. She was typing, then stopping. She was likely confused by my lack of engagement, my failure to play my assigned role of the admiring, slightly envious sister. Finally, a new message came through. Rude. I didn't reply. I just smiled, a small, private smile, and put my phone down. The next day, it was my mother. She called, her voice breezy and light, as if our last conversation hadn't involved her telling me I no longer had a place in the family. "Amelia, dear, I was just at the pharmacy and I was wondering, do you have any of that special sunscreen you bought for your trip to Greece last year? the one for sensitive skin? My face has been so dry lately." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. She wanted my help preparing for the trip she had kicked me out of. The entitlement was breathtaking. She assumed I would still perform the duties of the thoughtful, responsible daughter even after being formally stripped of my title. "I'm not sure, Mom," I said, my voice even. "I haven't seen it." It was a lie. The bottle was in my medicine cabinet. "Oh," she said, a hint of frustration in her tone. "Well, could you look? It would save me a trip back to the store. Ethan is taking me to get a pedicure soon, our little pre-trip treat." "I'm at work, Mom," I said, which was true. "I can't look right now." "Fine," she huffed, the breeze turning into a distinct chill. "I just thought you'd be happy to help. Never mind." She hung up without saying goodbye. Each interaction was like a small, confirming echo of their character. They were so wrapped up in their own world, so consumed by their own needs and desires, that they had no capacity to see me as a person with my own feelings. I was a resource, a convenience. When I wasn't convenient, I was a nuisance. The most telling interaction, however, came from Ethan on Friday evening, the night before their scheduled departure. He didn't call or text. He showed up at my apartment unannounced. My heart leaped into my throat when I saw him through the peephole, thinking, this is it. He knows. I opened the door, schooling my features into a neutral expression. He stood there holding a small, wilting potted orchid. He thrust it at me. "Here," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mom felt bad. She said you seemed upset the other night." He said it as if he were talking about a stranger. "She said you seemed upset." There was no acknowledgement of his own role, his own cruel words. In his mind, this was a transaction. His mother felt a flicker of guilt, and he was the errand boy sent with a cheap, dying plant to fix it. "Thanks," I said, taking the pot. He finally looked at me, a flicker of something, annoyance, impatience, in his eyes. "Look, Amelia, don't make this a whole thing, okay? It's just a trip. We'll bring you back a souvenir." A souvenir? A leather bookmark from Florence, perhaps. A miniature leaning tower of Pisa. A small trinket to compensate for the theft of a dream. "There's no need," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "You just go and have a good time." He seemed relieved. This was what he wanted. My blessing, my permission to enjoy his spoils without a shred of guilt. He gave me a brisk nod. "Right, well, we're off tomorrow. Don't want to be late." He turned and walked down the hall without another word. I closed the door and looked at the pathetic orchid in my hands. A peace offering from people who didn't understand what peace was, or what they had taken from me. I walked it to my kitchen and dropped the entire pot, ceramic and all, directly into the trash can. I slept soundly that night. For the first time in 5 years, the gnawing anxiety of trying to fit into a space where I wasn't wanted was gone. I was no longer contorting myself to please them, no longer hoping for a scrap of affection. The quiet in my apartment was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. It was the calm, not before the storm, but after it. The storm had already happened, inside me. What was coming for them was merely the weather. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke up without an alarm, feeling more rested than I had in years. The air in my apartment felt different, lighter. I made coffee and sat by the window, not in anxious anticipation, but with the placid curiosity of a scientist observing a controlled experiment. My phone, which I had placed face down on the counter, remained silent. I had a rough timeline of their day mapped out in my head, based on the original itinerary. The international flight to Florence was at 5:45 p.m. The car service Ethan had so smugly mentioned was scheduled to pick them up at noon, allowing them ample time for a smooth, stress-free check-in and perhaps a celebratory glass of champagne at an airport lounge. The image was so clear in my mind, a perfect tableau of their self-satisfaction. Around 10:00 a.m., my own suitcase, a sleek carry-on for a solo traveler, sat open on my bed. My flight was the next day. I began to pack, my movements calm and deliberate. A few linen dresses, a good pair of walking shoes, a sun hat. A copy of Vasari's Lives of the Artists that my dad had given me years ago, its pages soft with age. Each item I packed felt like a small act of reclamation. This was my trip now. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, my father's memory, and the quiet beauty of a place that had waited centuries for me to arrive. At 11:45 a.m., I pictured them gathering in my mother's hallway, the excited, last-minute flurry. "Did you pack the converter? Ethan, is the car here yet? Chloe, get off your phone and help with these bags." I could practically hear their voices, oblivious and entitled. At precisely 12:04 p.m., Chloe posted a story on Instagram. It was a boomerang video of her, my mother, and Ethan all clinking champagne glasses. They were in the back of a black town car. My mother was beaming, Ethan looked smug, and Chloe had a filter on that made her eyes sparkle unnaturally. The caption read, "Off to Italy. Ciao, haters. Family first, Tuscany bound making memories." Family first. The hypocrisy was so potent it was almost comical. I watched the short video loop a few times, a faint smile on my lips. They were so confident, so utterly unaware. It was fascinating, like watching a flock of birds flying merrily towards a window pane. I spent the next couple of hours cleaning my apartment, watering my non-orchid plants, and responding to work emails. I was clearing my own slate, preparing for my own departure. The city hummed with the normal sounds of a Saturday afternoon outside my window. Inside, there was only a profound and patient stillness. 2:30 p.m. By now, they would have arrived at the international terminal. They would be unloading their mountain of luggage, Chloe no doubt directing Ethan on how to handle her bags without scuffing them. They would stride into the terminal, heads held high, ready to be whisked away to their exclusive European adventure. 3:15 p.m. This was the critical window. They would approach the airline's business class check-in counter. They would present their pristine passports with an air of importance. My mother would give the agent her sweetest, most charming smile. Ethan would tap his fingers impatiently on the counter. Chloe would be taking a selfie. The agent would type their names into the system. And then, nothing. I found myself holding my breath. My gaze kept flicking to my phone, still dark and silent on the counter. Any second now. 3:20 p.m., silence. 3:25 p.m., silence. I started to feel a prickle of doubt. Had something gone wrong? Did they manage to talk their way through? Had my cancellation not processed correctly? The logical part of my brain knew that was impossible. Airline systems are binary. A ticket exists or it doesn't. There is no in-between. I forced myself to get up and make a cup of tea. My hands were perfectly steady. Whatever happens, happens, I told myself. You are free either way. I sat back down with my tea. The sun streamed into my living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was strangely peaceful. 3:32 p.m. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call, it was a text message from Chloe. The notification preview on my lock screen was short, stark, and exactly what I had been waiting for. 7 capital letters, radiating pure panic and fury. "Fix this now." I didn't pick up the phone immediately. I let the message sit there for a full minute, a monument to their shattered entitlement. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. It was perfectly brewed. Then, with a sense of ceremony, I unlocked my phone and opened the message. There it was, in a blue bubble, a command issued from a place of utter desperation. I could picture the scene perfectly. The 3 of them huddled around the check-in counter, the polite but firm refusal from the airline staff, the dawning public humiliation, the chaos, the anger. And in the center of their storm, they had turned to the one person they had so callously cast aside. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding a service. I smiled, the genuine, deep, cleansing smile mentioned in the title of this story. It wasn't a smile of malice or even of revenge. It was a smile of liberation. It was the smile of a woman who had finally realized that the cage door had been open all along, and all she had to do was step outside. My thumbs moved deftly over the keyboard, typing out the reply I had composed in my head days ago. It was calm, it was final, and it was, I felt, perfectly just. My reply was sent at 3:34 p.m. The two small blue checkmarks appeared almost instantly, indicating that Chloe had read it. For a few seconds, there was nothing. I imagined her staring at her phone, her brain struggling to process a response that was not one of immediate, panicked compliance. She was likely showing the screen to Ethan and my mother, their faces a mask of disbelief turning rapidly to fury. My message was simple. I can't. You made it very clear that my place was not with you on this trip. I respected your wishes and removed myself from all arrangements. This is your vacation now, so you'll have to manage it. Buon viaggio. The first incoming call came 12 seconds later. It was Ethan. The photo I had assigned to his contact, a picture of him and me with our father at a baseball game years ago, a relic from a happier time, flashed on the screen. His face was smiling in the picture, but I knew the face on the other end of the line would be contorted with rage. I silenced the call. Immediately, a text from him appeared. A string of furious, misspelled words. "What did you do, Amelia? Call me right now, this isn't funny." I ignored it. Then Chloe started calling. I silenced her call, too. She followed up with a series of texts that escalated in tone from desperate to abusive. "Amelia, please, what is going on? The lady says our tickets don't exist." "My God, did you cancel them? Are you insane? This cost a fortune." "You are a psycho, a jealous psycho. I hate you." And then the final boss entered the arena. My mother. Her calls had a different weight. For a fleeting second, a pang of the old guilt, the conditioned instinct to soothe her, flared up. I saw her face in my mind, not angry, but crumpled with a theatrical, wounded look she perfected over decades, the one that had always been my kryptonite. I silenced her call, and the next one, and the one after that. Her texts began. They were, in their own way, the most manipulative of all. "Amelia, darling, there seems to be a terrible mistake. Please call me so we can sort this out. I know you wouldn't do this to us. Your brother is making a terrible scene. You have to fix this. You're the only one with the information. Please, Amelia, for me. I am so disappointed in you. Your father would be ashamed." That last one should have hurt. It was the nuclear optio. N, the one she deployed when she knew she was losing a battle. Your father would be ashamed. But it didn't land. Because I knew, with a certainty that resonated in my very bones, that my father would not be ashamed of me. He would be ashamed of them. He would be heartbroken by their cruelty, their selfishness, their casual disregard for the daughter he had cherished. My phone was now a relentless cascade of notifications. Calls, texts, WhatsApp messages, even a FaceTime request from Chloe, who probably wanted to show me her tear-streaked, unfiltered face for maximum impact. It was a digital siege. I calmly went into my settings and enabled Do Not Disturb. The screen went dark and quiet. The siege was over. I sat in the silence, the echo of their panic still ringing in the air. The detonation had been a success. The fallout was their problem, not mine. I thought about them at the airport, the embarrassment, the logistical nightmare. Their flight was leaving in just over 2 hours. There was no way they could buy 3 last-minute, walk-up tickets to Florence, even if they had the money, which I doubted they had readily available without pooling resources. They had likely spent their ready cash on new outfits and pre-trip pedicures. They were stranded. Their grand, exclusive vacation had collapsed on the launch pad. The Instagram story of them clinking champagne glasses was now a monument to their hubris, a public record of a trip that would never happen. They would have to collect their mountain of luggage, trudge back to the car service, if it had even waited, and take the humiliating drive of shame back home. There would be no Tuscan sun for them, no charming villa, no making memories, only the bitter taste of reality. I felt a strange sense of emptiness, but it wasn't sadness. It was the clean, hollow feeling of a space that has been cleared of clutter. For years, my emotional landscape had been crowded with their expectations, their drama, their casual dismissals. Now it was empty. It was quiet. It was mine to refill as I saw fit. I knew one final step was necessary. They would not stop. When they got home, they would likely drive to my apartment. They would bang on my door. They would try to force a confrontation, a screaming match where they could twist my words and paint me as the villain who had ruined everything out of spite. I could not let that happen. My peace was too new, too fragile to be subjected to that kind of assault. I needed to have the final word, but it had to be on my terms. Not in a shouting match, but in a clear, undeniable statement of fact. A final closing of the book. I picked up my phone one last time and opened our family group chat. The one that had been mostly silent for months, save for logistical announcements and Chloe's selfies. It was time for the eulogy. I let the frantic energy of their private messages fade into the background. My own message had to be different. It couldn't be emotional or reactive. It needed the calm, irrefutable clarity of a historical record. I was, after all, an historian. This was my final entry on the subject of the Amelia Ethan-Chloe Aliner dynamic. I took a deep breath and began to type. To all of you, I wrote in the family group chat. I am not going to answer your calls or respond to your individual messages, so I am writing this here, once, so there are no misunderstandings. First, let's be clear about the terrible mistake at the airport. It was not a mistake. It was a consequence. On Tuesday, you informed me that I was not welcome on what you termed a family trip. You told me it wasn't my place. I simply took you at your word. Since I was no longer part of the trip, I canceled the arrangements that I had made and that I had paid for. The flights, the villa, the cars, all of it was booked by me on my credit card. I have simply reclaimed my property. The full refund is being processed back to my account. I paused, letting the simple, factual weight of those sentences settle. I wasn't just the spurned sister, I was the financier. It was a distinction they had conveniently forgotten. This trip to Italy, I continued, was my idea. I have been saving for it for over 2 years. It was meant to be my gift to Mom for her 60th birthday, a way for us to remember Dad in a place he always dreamed of seeing. I spent countless hours researching, planning every detail to make it perfect for everyone. When you told me I couldn't come, you weren't just excluding me from a vacation. You were stealing my gift, my work, and the memory of my father that I was trying to honor. You repackaged my love and effort as your own, and then had the audacity to throw me away from it. I started listing things then, not with anger, but with a detached precision. This isn't the first time, this is just the last time. Remember the first Christmas after Dad died, when I planned to make his favorite things, and you all left for a ski trip without. Telling me you said you tried to call, you didn't. Remember my 27th birthday, when you took me to a generic brunch after having already spent the day at the one museum I'd been wanting to see for months. You said I would have been bored. You decided for me what I would enjoy. Remember all the family decisions made on text threads I wasn't a part of. The holidays, the weekend plans, the inside jokes. For 5 years, since the day Dad was gone, you have systematically and deliberately pushed me to the outside. You made it clear that the family was a group of 3, and I was an obligation you occasionally had to tolerate. My thumbs moved quickly, the words flowing out of a place I had kept locked for too long. When Dad was sick, it was my place to put my life on hold to care for him. It was my place to manage the schedules, the medications, and the grief. I did it because I loved him, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. But after he was gone, my place became a constant, quiet reminder of a time you all wanted to forget. Instead of valuing my sacrifice, you resented me for it. You bonded over your shared desire to move on, and you left me behind with the memories. Telling me not to tag along to Italy was just the final, most honest thing you have said to me in years. It confirmed everything I have been feeling. So, thank you. Thank you for the clarity. I will not be fixing this. This is the new reality, the one you created. I am finally taking my place, which is separate from you. Do not contact me again. Do not come to my home. I am blocking all of you after I send this message. I truly hope you find what you are looking for. Goodbye. I read the message over once, twice. It was all there, it was the truth. With a final, steady tap, I hit send. Then, as promised, I went into my contacts and blocked Ethan, blocked Chloe, blocked my mother. I blocked their numbers from my phone and their profiles on all social media. It felt like erecting a soundproof wall, a beautiful, quiet barrier. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so immense it almost brought me to my knees. It was the feeling of putting down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The weight of hope, the weight of trying, the weight of caring about people who did not care back. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of serene activity. I finished my packing. I confirmed my own flight for the next morning. I ate a simple dinner of toast and jam, and it tasted like the most exquisite meal of my life. I didn't feel vengeful or triumphant. I just felt light, free. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be without its own kind of grief. The grief for the family I should have had, for the relationships now permanently severed. But it was a clean grief, a quiet sorrow, not the messy, toxic, everyday pain I had been living with for 5 long years. That night, for the first time since my father died, I dreamt of him. We were sitting on a sun-drenched terrace, the scent of lemons in the air. He didn't say anything. He just smiled at me, a warm, proud smile. And when I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through my window, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was on the right path. The plane descended through a layer of soft white clouds, revealing the patchwork landscape of Tuscany below. Rows of dark green cypress trees stood like exclamation points against the ochre soil. The terracotta roofs of farmhouses glowed in the late afternoon sun. My heart, which had felt so heavy and constricted for so long, seemed to expand in my chest. I wasn't watching this on a screen or in a book. I was here. Navigating the Florence airport alone was a breeze. Picking up the little Alfa Romeo was simple. Driving out of the city and onto the winding country roads felt like an act of liberation. With every kilometer I put between me and my old life, I could feel the tension unwinding from my shoulders. The air, whipping through the open window, smelled of sun-baked earth and wild herbs. Villa al Tramonto was even more beautiful than its pictures. It was a sturdy, honey-colored stone house, draped in ivy, with bright blue shutters. The owner, a cheerful woman named Signora Contini, greeted me with a warm smile and a bottle of Chianti from her brother's vineyard. She showed me around the property, pointing out the rosemary bushes and the ancient olive tree in the garden. She didn't ask why I was there alone. She didn't seem to find it strange at all. She just wished me a peaceful stay. And it was peaceful. The first few days, I did almost nothing. I slept late in a massive bed with crisp, white sheets. I swam in the cool, clear water of the pool. I sat on the terrace for hours, sipping coffee in the morning and wine in the evening, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink behind the rolling hills. The silence was vast and healing. It wasn't empty, it was full. Full of the buzz of bees, the chirping of cricket. The rustle of leaves in the breeze. There were no demanding texts. No passive-aggressive phone calls. No pressure to perform happiness for anyone's benefit. My happiness, when it came, was quiet, genuine, and entirely my own. On the 4th day, I drove into Florence. I walked the same streets that the Medici and Michelangelo had walked. As an architectural historian, I was in paradise. But I wasn't just seeing buildings, I was feeling them. I stood beneath Brunelleschi's magnificent dome and felt a sense of awe that was so pure and overwhelming, it brought tears to my eyes. These were tears of joy, not sorrow. I visited the Uffizi Gallery, and I stood for a long time in front of Botticelli's Primavera. I thought of my father and how his face would have lit up seeing it in person. I didn't feel sad. I felt a deep, comforting sense of connection to him, as if I were seeing it for both of us. He was with me in a way my living family had never been. He was present in my love for history, my appreciation for beauty, my quiet strength. One evening, I found a small, family-run trattoria in a tiny village not far from the villa. I sat at a small table outside, under a canopy of grapevines. I ordered pasta with wild boar ragu and a glass of the local red wine. It was simple, perfect, and delicious. As the sky deepened to indigo and the stars began to appear, I thought about my family. I wondered what the aftermath of the Great Italy debacle had been. I pictured the bitter arguments, the blame, the sourness that must now permeate their every interaction. Had they learned anything? I doubted it. People like them rarely did. Their world was built to protect them from consequences. But I knew I had, at the very least, shattered their mirror. They could no longer look at their reflection without seeing the cracks. The peace I felt wasn't about their suffering. It was about my absence from it. Their drama, their toxicity, their noise, it was all 1,000 miles and a world away. I had chosen myself. I had chosen peace. I had chosen to honor my father's memory not with a forced, miserable family trip, but with a genuine, joyful pilgrimage. I raised my wine glass to the Tuscan stars, a solitary figure at a table for one. To Dad, I whispered to the quiet night, and to finding my own place. I took a sip. The wine was rich and full of flavor. I was finally home. So I have to ask you, the person listening to my story now, have you ever had to make a choice between the family you were born into and the person you were meant to become? It's a terrifying choice, but sometimes the quietest goodbyes are the most powerful. Sometimes you have to cancel the ticket to find your own destination.